The following work is an informative video about teaching translation. My name is Maria Teresa Olvera Sarmiento and my teacher is Marisela Merchant. I am from Mexico City. Teaching translation. Every translation activity has one or more specific purposes. In whichever they may be, the main aim of translation is to serve as a cross-cultural bilingual communication vehicle among peoples. In the past few decades, this activity has developed because of rising international trade, increased migration, globalization, the recognition of linguistic minorities, and the expansion of the mass media and technology. For this reason, the translator plays an important role as a bilingual or multicultural, cross-cultural transmitter of cultures and truths by attempting to interpret concepts and speech in a variety of texts as faithfully and accurately as possible. The study of translation and interpretation goal is use of language as a tool in a future professional activity. Translators focus on practical aspects of total proficiency in their source and target language. Proficiency in foreign language is required for translating as well as excellent command of the translator's mother tongue. Head of Zurich School of Translation assures, excellence in the mother tongue is relevant. The translator's target language is quite wrongly taken for granted. Translation requires intelligence, mental effort, and linguistic skill, knowledge of source text, and mastery of the target language. Sociocultural knowledge is extremely important. The translator is immersed in cultural transfer, requiring from him to be bicultural more than bilingual. Difficulties when translating. Translators usually have to deal with 6 different problematic areas in their work, whether they are translating technical documents or a sworn statement. These include lexical semantic problems, grammar, syntax, rhetoric, and pragmatic, and cultural problems, not to mention administrative issues, computer-related problems, and stress. Lack of proficiency in the target language. Pedagogically, translation provides an important bootstrapping, which speeds access into the target language. Learning a second language in a school setting can be linked to gaining familiarity with another country and its culture by looking at pictures in a book or reading descriptions. Only by gradual steps does one gain greater sociolinguistic and cultural knowledge, but only living in the other country gives one the experiential and existential sensibility for deeper knowledge. Even then, of course, no one can ever become a complete native of a second culture. All second language learners necessarily begin with translation, overt or covert, until their linguistic competences reaches the point at which they can use the second language without conscious awareness, but even then, psycholinguistic research shows that the first language is being activated, suggesting that translation is still taking place subliminally. Lack of intercultural competence or sensitivity. No one has mentioned the old Italian poem Traductor Traditor. I recall a comment by an interpreter on interpreting a speech by Khrushchev. When he told a traditional Russian story to illustrate a point, the interpreter realized that the story would make no sense to English hearers. So he quickly realized this and substituted a completely different story which would be familiar and make the same point. Even in technical translation, people working in a field have standard expressions which a translator unfamiliar with the field would be unfamiliar with. A professional translator hired by an archaeology journal to translate article summaries into Spanish produced odd literal translations because she was unfamiliar with the field. Literary translation, of course, is vastly more complex because it includes a great deal of cultural and emotional content, and poetry in particular requires a complete recasting. I have heard it said that the English translation of the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam is better than the original. My experience using translating activities with my students and their responses. When it comes to my personal experience using translating activities with my students, I must confess those activities have never been part of my teaching. Thus, I'm wordless about the topic as long as it refers to my personal experience. Teaching translation has never been part of my curricula. Hence, I find quite challenging to talk about something I have never done. Here is a proof, some images of the way I teach with my students. Thank you very much.